Hello and welcome to ASMR Who, and I just watched Boom, the third episode of Doctor Who, Series 14, and I am going to stick with Series 14. I was kind of coming around on the whole Season 1 business, but so far I have felt that the series has felt more like a continuation of what has come before rather than a new beginning. And also so many other reviewers and reactors, and I mean like genuine sort of YouTube not reactions in the way that these videos are, but like actual on-camera reacting to the episode itself. A lot of people so far from last week seem to have really been doing, really been calling it Series 14. Even, new viewers who have not watched the show before have been calling it Series 14. So I'm going to stick with Series 14. Anyway, yeah, that's regardless of that whole point. Boom. Series 14, Episode 3, written by, of course, Stephen Moffat, who was well known to Doctor Who fans. And this was an episode that I think had a lot of hype surrounding it. A lot of people were really, really looking forward to this one. A lot of people were really anticipating this episode. Stephen Moffat is a writer who not only helmed a very successful era of the show, both commercially and I think, with fans as well, The Matt Smith era was very successful, and the Capaldi era, while maybe not being quite as successful in terms of the general public, seems to be a real fan favourite. Two of the stories from that era topped the fans' best story poll recently. Heaven Sent and World Enough and Time, Dr. Falls. So yeah, I think Moffat is a real fan favourite writer, and I think a lot of people were very excited to see him come back, especially because as at the time it was considered controversial. I'm not sure now, with the benefit of hindsight and everything that's happened since, you would consider the Moffat era that controversial. But I think most people, even fans of the Moffat era, would say that some of his strongest stories, if not his strongest stories entirely, were in that initial Russell T Davies era, when Moffat was just a guest writer. Stories like The Empty Child and The Girl in the Fireplace and Blink and Silence in the Library, which are all pretty fantastic stories. And so I think going back to that kind of Moffat writing under Russell T Davies, I think that kind of got a lot of people very hyped for this episode, and just the prospect of Moffat coming back after 7 years away was very exciting for a lot of people. And so he brings us Boom. And first of all, what I will say is that I've been out with family this evening. I've watched this, of course, more or less when it came out. About 1:15, I think I got round to it, but I watched it, not on broadcast. I watched it on iPlayer, sort of early hours of Saturday morning. I've been out with family on, this evening. Had a couple of drinks. I'm not watching it drunk, but I'm also going to say, I'm not watching it 100% sober. So perhaps that might, I don't want to use that as like a damage control, but that might affect the way I view this story, the way I, take in this story, so to speak. And I want to get that out there, first and foremost, for the sake of transparency. Because I didn't love this. I haven't seen any other reactions aside from a mate of mine who, as I say, I got round to this about 1:15, so if you watched it at 12 o'clock on iPlayer, you just finished it by the time I was getting round to it, and a mate of mine had just finished it and said, oh, it sucked. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. And perhaps their opinion influenced me, but I've got to say, I think I kind of agree. The thing is, I feel that I felt this watching Stephen Moffat's drama Inside Man, which was from a couple of years ago, which had David Tennant and Stanley Tucci, and if you know that drama, you know it. But if you watch that drama, I think you can really hear Stephen Moffat in the dialogue of it, and I think that's absolutely true of this story as well. And I don't want to be rude, but I don't mean that in a good way. I just felt that this was, how do I describe it? I just felt that this, I don't think Stephen Moffat's writing style is bad per se, but I think it's very noticeable, and given that he's written so much Doctor Who, to have another Stephen Moffat script that's so clearly by Stephen Moffat, personally, I just think that it was a bit like, I just feel like in general, I've seen this before. I've seen the Doctor in this kind of a situation, maybe not to this extreme, before. But I also think it's the case of one of the things in the early reviews, was that, Millie Gibson as Ruby Sunday gets loads to do in this and really shines. And that's kind of true for the first half of the episode, but then she gets shot and taken out of action, and basically isn't there for the rest of the episode, and I found that really disappointing. I felt that the side characters were the whole kind of thing of one character really likes another character, and the other one doesn't get it, and even just the sort of the idea of the guy, the male character really likes the female character, and she doesn't. It's not really reciprocated necessarily. She doesn't see those. We've seen that in Stephen Moffat scripts before, right? Like that general idea, it just felt very familiar. Character dynamics. Of course, we had Villain Guard pop up again, which is a Stephen Moffat thing from stories like Empty Child, Twice Upon a Time. I just, my ultimate feeling coming away from this is underwhelmed. I'm underwhelmed. Perhaps on a rewatch I'll really enjoy it a lot more, but I think Stephen Moffat has written a lot of great Doctor Who. But I also think he's written enough. And I remember when when Stephen Moffat was announced to be coming back, and I wasn't massively surprised, but I still kind of groaned a bit. And I really wanted this episode to be to prove me wrong, basically, to say this is why Stephen Moffat coming back is not a bad thing. But I was very underwhelmed by this episode, and I've got to say, in terms of this series, I'm now kind of 3 for 3 on in terms of middling episodes, middling to bad, and I do think all 3 lean more towards middling. That is, I don't think any of these 3 episodes have been outright bad, but I do think they have been very, for me, lackluster and underwhelming. And was it worth getting Stephen Moffat back for this? I don't know. He's written a lot of Doctor Who. I think he's probably written enough, quite frankly. We know he's written, or at least co-written, the Christmas special, which will be titled Joy to the World. We know he's not involved in the next series. I kind of hope that will be his last involvement. And it's not a thing of, I hate Moffat, but I think he's written enough, and I think it's not just about, is it a new idea? Because the central idea of the Doctor steps on a landmine and he can't do anything about it is a new idea that Stephen Moffat has not done before, but everything else surrounding that felt like stuff Stephen Moffat has done before. And so I think it's just a case of, it's not just, is the central idea a new one? Is the way you're approaching the show, is the way you're writing the side characters, is the way you're approaching the dynamic different enough? With this, I didn't feel like it was. As I say, perhaps I need to rewatch this with a fresh, with an open mind, you know what I mean? Almost a fresh set of eyes. Again, I'm not really drunk, but I've had a few drinks, and also I will say I knew that my mate had thought that it was bad before I watched it, and that may have influenced my watching of it. I'm aware that may have impacted my opinion of it, but I can only say what I felt, and I said at Christmas that I was happy to sort of let this era be for other people, and we're 2 weeks in now, 3 episodes into the series, and I'm really glad actually that I sort of took that step back. I talked about it in my Church on Ruby Road review reaction video, that I that was the point at Christmas, that I thought, I'm not loving this. I'm not hating it, but I'm not loving it. And if other people are loving it, that's great, but I don't think this is for me. So far, the series has kind of just proved that. I've not hated any of these episodes. I've not loved them. And I think they are, while there's lots of good things about them, I think they're very flawed. And I think for me, it's, I really like Ncuti. I like Millie. I don't like the general vibe and direction of the show in this form. And as much as I kind of had high hopes for this episode because of Stephen Moffat coming back and because of the hype, I wasn't, really excited and oh my god, this is going to be the best thing ever. That's just not where I'm at personally, and I'm really glad that I took that step back, and that's where I'm at with this series, because it's not the worst, but it's really, I just can't see myself going back to many of these episodes in the future, or that often, and it's a shame because I think Ncuti's great. I think this is probably the weakest episode for Ncути, so I don't know. I don't know, because they had good stuff to do, both Ncути and Millie, but my instinct is that Ncути got great stuff to do in this, but I think it's still his weakest episode. I don't know. I'm just underwhelmed. And I kind of get the sense that might not be the fan reaction, but that is how I felt. I talked about this a little bit I talked about the Chimes of Midnight in my Big Finish main range reviews, if you care to check those out. And that was the Chimes of Midnight is a story that has a really popular reputation, and I did a whole preface before I talked about it. I really like that story, by the way, but I did a whole preface about how, I don't care about going with the fan consensus and loving the really popular episodes and stuff, and if people really do love this episode, I kind of hope this is proof of that I have, I do have my own opinions. I'd be really interested to see what people made of this, but yeah, I'm interested in 73 Yards. It seems like it is going to be a case of the Doctor's gone missing, and it'll be, the Doctor's gone missing because he's filming Sex Education. So maybe it'll be a real showcase for Ncути. I'm fairly sure a while ago Russell said it was the best thing he'd ever written. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. I don't know. I don't have expectations at this point. I hope I enjoy it, but we'll see. So far, this series has I kind of want to say underwhelmed. It's left me underwhelmed over, I think, this episode certainly, because of the hype around it. My general response to this series has been kind of as expected. I don't love it, I don't hate it, I think it's just fine. But let me know what you thought of Boom. Did you enjoy this episode? Did you really love the return of Stephen Moffat? Am I totally wrong for not loving this? I'm very interested to hear what people think. But yeah, other than that, thank you for watching, thank you for listening, thank you for your time, of course, as always, and I will see you next week for 73